There has been a huge surge in the data growth in almost all companies, right? Big, medium, small, everywhere. And if you look at it like 20 years back, even 1 megabyte of data used to be huge. We used to think it's a huge data. But now it has gone to stuff like petabyte, exabyte, and all, and whatnot will come later. We have to see.
Early 2010s is when I started hearing, maybe between 2012-13, more on the whole digital transformation initiative, right? And that actually brought in a lot of focus on eventually CIO side, and then from there moving on to establishing or creating a brand new role, CDO.
So slowly this chief data officer role has moved more from an IT perspective in terms of just data management to also a business part of it, in terms of seeing, okay, how can we help business executives generate value using the data.
Let's just say CXOs can make informed or smart decisions, right, for business growth. Which means the role CDO actually need to have both side of understanding, background, or maybe even work experience, right?
Yes, yes.
Hello and welcome to AI Connect. It is wonderful to be back again with another episode. And in today's episode, we are going to talk about a very brand new topic that we haven't touched upon so far. And that topic is building a world-class data organization. So this is going to be a 3-part series. The context of this discussion today is, in today's digital economy, data isn't just an asset. It's the lifeblood for enterprises to make decisions and drive innovations. As organizations capture unprecedented volumes of data at this time, the challenge is to organize that data, analyze that data, and derive value from data that drives important decisions, that drives business growth. Yet, many organizations are fundamentally struggling with one question, considering that many enterprises capture and generate data across various touch points. This unprecedented volume of data is sitting at their base. The challenge is that, the central question is that how do I use this data to drive or derive business intelligence that drive my business growth? This challenge has given rise to a new organizational imperative, the need for dedicated data centers of excellence, led by seasoned data leaders who can bridge the gap between technology capabilities and business outcomes. In this first episode of our 3-part series in AI Connect, I'm going to invite Anirban Majumdar, who is the co-founder and CEO of Prescience Decision Solutions, to discuss this topic in depth. And we will go deep into this topic to unearth some of the important foundational need and the drivers for building a world-class data organizations. So with that, Anirban, welcome to AI Connect.
Thanks, Jaydip. It's nice to be back on this.
Absolutely, and I think today we are here with a very important topic, which is timely and which is at the center of almost all enterprises. That is data, right? So with a huge jump in, or the surge of generation of data and capturing data, do you think, how do you think organization is taking care of that, right? Is that all under their control?
I think it's a good question. Whether everything is under control, let's see. But yeah, there has been a huge surge in the data growth in almost all companies, right? Big, medium, small, everywhere. And if you look at it like 20 years back, even 1 megabyte of data used to be huge. We used to think it's a huge data. But now it has gone to stuff like petabyte, exabyte, and all, and whatnot will come later. We have to see. And again, there's a variety of data. So each organizations, especially the bigger ones, which are very complex organizations, they have so many different, software systems. You have your ERP system, your some HRMS or CRM, and then lots of small, pockets of applications. everyone is taking data and everyone is generating data. So that creates a huge amount of data, which will can be transactional data, whether it's financial or sales or purchase or all this kind of things. You will have customer data, employee data, operational data. Then a lot of people have the sensor data also. IoT and all have become very prominent now. And that also, while each device may be generating very small amounts, when you have a huge amount of or huge number of such sensors, that also leads to a huge amount of data.
Amazing.
And then you have the unstructured data. You have all kinds of documents, you have emails, you have customer call records, audio records, and their transcripts. You have images, videos, and whatnot. So it becomes very difficult unless you have a set of processes and guidelines to manage this data. And every day you are generating, it's not like you're stopping generating data. Even on a day, on a Sunday or any other holiday when things are not working, even then you're generating data. Always on, right? And then you, on the other side, you have people who are consuming this data. They need this data for various purposes, whether to have the processes going on, or whether to decide something, whether to do something. So they are consuming the data. So one part is generating, other part is right. And these are internal data. You also might have external data coming in. So there is a huge data growth. And other thing is that also the consumption has been led because today, if you see in many companies, most of the folks have access to the data because they have laptops or mobile devices or some other device to connect to whatever data is relevant for her activities in the company. So which was not the case 20 years back when so many people may not have access to systems. So if you look at even a retail store, and the store individual store itself, so many people have access to different data terminals. So all this is causing a lot of churn, and the companies, what they're seeing is that their data infrastructure is increasing in a very rapid manner. So they are storing data. So earlier, what we didn't have the cloud. 20 years back, it was primarily hard disk, and then used to take it off to tape drives, right? The data will be stored in tapes. So even then, you had the regulations which will say such data you store for 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, which is still there. But right now, you use tapes only for long-term archival. You're not looking at it to take out data immediately if you feel that you're going to need it over the next 2 months or 6 months, whatever. So that's where the cloud infrastructure, which has come in, has helped a lot, but it also led to a sprawl, data sprawl, as I could love to call it. And there you have data all over the place, correct? And that leads to data management challenges. You don't know what is the data coming in, how good or bad that data is in terms of the quality, in terms of the consistency, in terms of the completeness. So how do you manage this data so that the users of this data are getting the right data, which based on which they can take actions, based on which they can decide certain things. And the other part that also comes in, that all this data that has come in has led to a lot of new technologies. So you also need the talent to manage this data, and then do analytics and visualization, and you run data science models on that. So unless you have the right set of talent, you cannot have any competitive advantage over your rivals.
Absolutely. So, keeping that in the context, right? I mean, one side you have this whole piles of data that are being generated 24 hours, 7 days, 365 days. On the other hand, organizations are faced with what are those data that are really useful, what are those data that probably have a junk. That means this whole data management piece. And then with the charter of getting the right data, putting them into the structure, which obviously means a lot of work, right? And keeping in also mind that these data are also created by different organizational functions, right? Some of them are external facing, some of them are internal facing. So clearly this isn't a charter for everybody, but at the same time they are responsible or they are generating data. So someone in the organization obviously basically needs to step up and take the mandate, which is why this rise of different roles like chief data officers and
Correct.
other important roles came up, right? So can you give a little bit of context of how these roles actually have come about in the recent past, and give a little bit of or share a little bit of context in terms of how important these roles are becoming in terms of organizations overall, not just the data management, which is the internal part, but in a way, kind of become a data steward to contribute towards organizational growth by bringing in those insights or maybe intelligence that is actionable.
Sure, yeah. So, if you really look at it, earlier or even now in a lot of companies, the whole data piece in terms of storing and then distributing data to the users is under the CIO's organization, the IT team, and that's where it was even earlier days. So the IT team may set up a data warehouse, based on the technologies available in those days, and create that from which some analysis may be done, someone may take out. But slowly they realized that it needs some amount of effort in terms of data management, data governance to ensure that the data is right. And the initial push came more from regulatory and compliance perspective than anything else. So one of the key acts that actually pushed this in the US was the Sarbanes-Oxley, which needed you to do a lot of stuff and comply with a lot of things in the financial services space, right? And then, of course, you had similar things in pharma, in healthcare, and all. So, whether to submit a lot of reports and then get a lot of things audited, not just the financial part, but also in terms of your drug trials or any other compliance things. So, there you needed to have the right data to, and then crunch it and put it in a report in the raw data as well as the whatever calculations you have to do. So that's where the people realized that we needed someone to look at it and play that role. So that's where the initial chief data officer kind of role started coming up. The actual first chief data officer is that came in Capital One in 2002,
Okay.
which is like almost 23 years back. And surprisingly, the next company to announce such a role was 3 years later, Yahoo in 2005. So it took that much time. So even till 2010, there were almost just about 15 companies in the Fortune 500 list who had a chief data officer. But people were trying to, take that path so that at least the regulatory and compliance and risk functions can work properly with the right data, so that they don't get affected. So the auditor or the government regulator should not come back and say your data is wrong. So that also led to a lot of other consequences for them. So that's where the things came and where it started. But then this role slowly evolved. So in those days, it was mostly under the IT team. So one person would be, marked as a CDO or some equivalent role in terms of the data management, data manager. So there, once this was done and they could clearly demarcate that this is the clean data for which we can use for these things, then it slowly went that, okay, we are getting data, what else can we do with this? And then the business other parts came in terms of doing analysis, in terms of first, visualization and generating reports for the senior executives or for others, so that they get a sense in a easier way than just looking at the raw data, right? So if it's only raw data, you see, okay, last 1 week, 2 week, 1 month, 1 quarter data, it sometimes becomes very overwhelming. But people are looking at only key insights to see, which is where the dashboards came, and then which led to the evolution of dashboarding tools also, which became better and better to do that part. And then from there came the analytics part of it, in terms of doing business analytics or creating data science models. So slowly, this chief data officer role has moved more from an IT perspective in terms of just data management to also a business part of it in terms of seeing, okay, how can we help business executives generate value using the data. Okay, so that's where they start showing, okay, what other value, how can we use it, whether it's related to customer analytics or whether it's related to employee analytics or supply chain side. So all this where what kind of data, what cuts of data should I provide to these users so that they can do that. So from pure technical role, this is slowly evolving to a more business focused role. And of course, with time, so some of the companies have also started redefining these roles, so calling them like a chief data and analytics officers. So nowadays we see quite a few companies having chief AI officers. So who will look at more like an AI thing and then take it forward in terms of how to do those AI stuff so that it generates value for the organization.
So one of the interesting thing you mentioned is that the role CDO has two parts to it. One aspect of that is IT,
Correct.
which is essentially the governance part, the security part, the organization or the storing part, and all that. The second aspect of it is driving or deriving intelligence and serve it in a way that other business leaders or LOB leaders, or maybe basically let's just say CXOs, can make informed or smart decisions, right, for business growth. Which means the role CDO actually need to have both side of understanding, background, or maybe even work experience, right?
Yes, yes. So that way it has evolved a lot in the sense. So now people say that the CDO or whatever equivalent designation you want to give that role should know the data part of things in terms of the data technologies, should know the business. So it's not like that without knowing the business they can really help the your lines of business or the function heads in that company do anything. And third part is now they're saying that person should also know a little bit about AI. So that what AI use cases can be created out of the data that you have and out of the business needs. Where do you start? What kind of POCs should you allow these people to do? Because you can do like 1,000 different POCs with AI, but you have limited budget, limited time. So how do you kind of figure out, okay, this, let me start with these 3 or 4 cases, do the POCs. So unless you know the business, unless you know your data, unless you know what AI can possibly do, you will not be able to do that.
Correct. So that's a good segue to my next question. What kind of challenges CDOs face today,
Right.
considering there are so many variables in the data space, right?
Yeah, so for CDOs, again, the first and most important challenge still remains in terms of data quality and data governance. And again, there is across organizations, these things differ because first and most important question is who owns the data? Is it the individual functions or the LOBs, or is it the CDO? Right? And there are different opinions, and each opinion has its own value in terms of where they're coming from. But again, that has to be very clear that whoever is the owner of the data for that part has to ensure that proper data stewardship is happening, so that data is clean and data can be used for this thing. So even if the CDO is not the owner of the data, and in many cases probably it makes sense for the CDO to not be the owner of the data in large companies, then she should ensure that people are at least doing things or taking steps to ensure the right, correct data, clean data is coming to the data warehouse or the lake house, from wherever you are picking it up for AI or visualization or analytics. So that part is definitely there. The second part where it always happens is, and this again is in terms of where have you put this role? Does it report to the CIO or the CEO or CFO? So different organizations again have different things. Now, there is a point of view that it should be under the IT organization and the CIO, and there's also a point of view that it should not be there. So I firmly believe that the chief data officer or equivalent should be away from the IT organization, primarily because IT has a very well-defined charter,
Process and structure.
right? What they have to provide,
Correct.
and it's also a cost center, right? So the charter of the CIO is always you have to do this, keep the lights on, maybe make some changes in the things within this budget, or if you can do it even lower. But for the CDO, he has to show value. Like what additional value am I getting out of data which is helping the company maybe reduce costs or increase sales or improve customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. So for doing that, if you may need to spend something, right? You have to do POCs, or you may have to buy some new tools and all. So there might always be a conflict between the two roles.
Correct.
Because one is cost center, one is value generating center.
Correct.
So that's where it probably makes sense for them to do that. Secondly, for the CDO, again, it's a thing in terms of what I'd like to call is offense versus defense. So you start off from the defensive side in the sense that you ensure that data quality is correct, there is no data breach, there is no cyber security issues. So that is a minimum thing you have to do, right? It's a non-negotiable. Hygiene and non-negotiable.
Correct.
But on the other side also, you have to be on the forefront and say, what things can I do to ensure that my business stakeholders are able to see value. They're able to do their work in a better, faster, more efficient way. So to kind of balance these two is also a very important part of the chief data officer, which is why some companies have now trying to split the roles into two. So this data part, keeping the data clean and also safe from hackers and other things. One person does chief data, and maybe you have a separate chief AI officer or chief analytics officer to take care of the value creation.
Okay.
So again, it depends from company to company where they feel things may work better.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense because majority of the use cases are business focused.
Right.
So I think the custodian of data is one aspect of it, which you mentioned, which means like ensuring that the governance part, the storage part, the life cycle of that part, which I think has been anyway a charter on the CIO side of the organization, the IT side of the organization. But increasingly, the use cases which are more business focused, it is important that the CDO has a skin in the game, and brings in that revenue side of use cases, brings in that value, and probably become a revenue generation function, and solely depending on the management of the data, and remain as a cost center.
Correct.
Right.
And this value generation also is like, for this you need a different set of talent compared to what you have in the IT side. People may know how to manage it, let's say a Snowflake or a Redshift data warehouse, and I have kept it there and it's there, and then how do I integrate with different IT systems and all those things. But on this side, you need people who are good business analysts, who are good data scientists, who can then generate this thing. So if I have to do something on the marketing side, I have to do personalization, I have to do customer segmentation and all those things. So those are the kind of talent which the regular IT team will not have.
Correct.
So again, the role of the CDO or the chief AI officer becomes to ensure that you get the right talent to do this.
Absolutely. So I think basically the creation of responsibilities and the design also sort of sits under that on the application side. Right. So great. I think for our first part, I guess this was really a roundup in terms of the rise of the role of CDO. In fact, I was just thinking as we were talking, explaining the CDO role, early 2010s is when I started hearing, maybe between 2012-13, more on um, the whole digital transformation initiative, right? And that actually brought in a lot of focus on eventually CIO side, and then from there moving on to establishing or creating a brand new role, CDO, who played a very important role, because
Right.
the digital transformation again is completely moving from an offline to an online world, right?
Exactly.
And I think entire 2010 to 20 was that time, or maybe even before 2005 to 2020. I know there are still smaller companies who are kind of making that migration,
Right.
but we almost take it for granted now that businesses have already moved their many touch points today and online, including government, right?
Correct.
Most of our government end user functions now looks like are portal based, digital app based,
Right,
and so on.
right.
Right. So, just wanted to give a view to our viewers what's coming down in the pipe in this series. What else that we will be talking about? Just a quick glimpse, one or two lines, and then maybe we can wrap up this.
Yeah. So we will probably discuss in terms of how do you structure this whole organization that you're building, the chief data officer's organization, the talent and all. So whether it's a single central function and or a horizontal which caters to all, or there are other views that it should be dispersed across all the functions because it's common to all. So we will take a look at that. What makes sense? Okay, is there a right answer in true sense, or is it also depends on the maturity of the company in the data areas? And then you'll also see if you're doing a central function, how what makes it successful, how should it be structured, and what we have seen some of the more successful companies do in terms of examples which has worked for them and which could probably work for our viewers also.
Excellent. So maybe in this process, we'll also talk about a bit of pros and cons of both models,
Right.
and also maybe take an example or two
Sure.
to narrate this in terms of how this is really panning out in real life as we see in the business. Right. So, all right, Anirban, thank you very much for your time today. With
Sure.
this, we'll wrap up today's episode of the three-part series of building a data organization, world-class data organization. And we will see you again on the next episode of the same series. For now, we will take a bye from you. All right. So, see you again.
See you. Bye.